Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cage Variety Show. We are from the Niche Cage, the niche-cage.com, where you can absorb Aotearoa sporting insights and information. We write a fair bit about Aotearoa sport. Got a Warriors winning footy notebook. Flying Kiwis will be live. Got some information. Got the Kiwi County Tour happening. So there's a preview yarn about the round that is being played right now. Lots of Aotearoa sporting information can be found on our website, theniche-cage.com. That's where we do a big old hefty yarns about Aotearoa sport. And then we jump on podcasts and we deliver much of the same yarns in an audio video format for your Kiwi sporting fandom. Prior to this, we did record our Patreon podcast, which is a weekly activity. And today we went deep into Black Caps cricket. We talked a little bit about the World Test Championship final, and then we got into a heated kōrero about Black Caps contracts and player rankings and all sorts of Black Caps things. So you can check that out. If you are a member of the Patreon whānau, check that out. Otherwise, Patreon is the best way to support the Niche Cage straight up the guts. We do have all sorts of options that you can support the Niche Cage, but Patreon is probably the easiest way right now. Patreon.com/our Niche Cage. Join the Patreon whānau. You support us straight up the guts, and you get an extra podcast every week. And we will try to stretch that over to other platforms, maybe Substack, maybe elsewhere. But for now, Patreon's the best way to support all our content. Speaking of Substack and almighty Aotearoa sporting yarn, every Monday and Friday, we deliver it via Substack, the nichecage.substack.com. And we whip up a Kiwi Sports newsletter with fresh information, fresh insights. Monday saw me breaking down the Aotearoa Warriors depth with local juniors. Every Monday, Nico the Wildcard delivers a domestic football wrap as well for you football freaks. And that also features links to all of the big yarns on our website, as well as all the podcast information. It's all there for you as part of an email newsletter dispatch every Monday and Friday evening. So basically, Monday, we got the newsletter coming out via Substack. Tuesday, we've got the Variety Show podcast. We've got a Patreon podcast. Thursday, we've got the Niche Cast. Friday evening, we're back with an email newsletter dispatch. But the website's there every day, 24/7, theniche-cage.com. Hit us up however you want it. You can jump on Twitter, you can jump on Instagram, you can jump on Facebook, you can jump on YouTube, Substack, Patreon. It's all there for you. We're just out here doing our best mahi for Aotearoa and Aotearoa sport. The energy levels were high on the Patreon podcast, so hopefully I didn't blow a gasket. I don't know the correct terminology there. Hopefully I wasn't too fizzed up. Let me just say that from the Patreon podcast, but we're here for the variety show. And funnily enough, what happens when you're too fizzed up? You need some grounding, and that's what we're going to do with our mindfulness. So let's go.
This one will help you definitely if you're coping with a bit of extra fizz. Then this is from Shunryu Suzuki, who said you should rather be grateful for the weeds you have in your mind, because eventually they will enrich your practice.
What do you interpret weeds in your mind as?
That's a very good question. My first instinct was thinking of it from a meditation perspective, right? Where you're sitting there trying to be level-headed and calm and just in control of your thoughts or whatever, and then you get that distracted thought that pops up, and then you got to acknowledge it and brush it aside, kind of thing. Like, those are the weeds. The acknowledging and the brushing aside is the clearing the garden of the weeds. But of course, I think it's something that probably works just as well in many other contexts, not just when you're specifically practicing, but just throughout the entirety of your life. I suppose anytime you have those, like, I don't know, the negative emotions, or just you catch yourself acting in a way which you're not exactly, I don't know, proud of, or it just isn't what you intended, and then you realize like this is where that practice is supposed to be implemented in the life, not just in the 15 minutes I sit there meditating kind of thing. Um, so I think the weed concept is one that can probably be applied quite liberally around the place. Just
Yeah,
like the way that weeds grow themselves, many different
commonly
types and many different shapes and sizes and places.
your mind is a garden. How about that one? Full of
That's
full of flowers and weeds. The flowers are the beautiful, positive, grateful, generous, loving, soul-connected thoughts. Your weeds are the dark arts, and we recognize the dark arts. We're aware of the dark arts, but we embrace divinity and we move towards the light. And I'm going to get the Kiwi sports agenda started with a whole lot of blossoming light. But it's Warriors grit and grind light. Because the Warriors repeated their grit and grind recipe in Canberra against the Raiders for Jared Croker's 300th game. Now, just to check here, I had referred to the Warriors as a grit and grindy type of team earlier in the season, correct?
definitely, absolutely. I've heard it several times.
The last 2
I've
weeks
probably
we've
said it
had
myself.
the last 2 weeks we've had a win over the Dolphins and a win over the Raiders, which were pure grit and grind experiences. And yes, for Warriors fans, this isn't Ja Morant grit and grind. This is pure Aotearoa Warriors mana grit and grind. Because last week against the Dolphins were missing players. They were a bit outclassed by the Warriors, but they hung in there. I think it was like 8-6 at halftime to the Dolphins. They're tough. They're rugged. They might have been below par, but under Wayne Bennett, they're not going away. They did go away this weekend, though, I think. But they used up all their juice against the Warriors. And the Warriors just had to stick in there, ride it out, rally with the local Auckland crowd, and get the dub, which is what they did. They eventually tore the Dolphins apart. In Canberra, well, all I was thinking during that first half was just get through it. Just absorb this, ride the wave, because the Raiders, they were fizzed up. They were frothing. They were high energy. But it's hard to maintain that. It's hard to sustain that. And the Warriors got a bit of confidence from their defense. They still made a lot of errors with the footy. They kept giving the Raiders an opportunity. And obviously the Raiders were rallying behind their home crowd, which, fair play, respect to the Raiders, I think it was over 25,000, which is higher than what the Warriors have had this season. So respect to them. Warriors, 3 consecutive games over 20,000. At Mount Smart Go Media Stadium this year, home of the Mount Smart Academy. The Warriors just had to ride the wave. They had to grit and grind, absorb all that energy like a sponge, just soak up the energy, soak up the hype, soak up the atmosphere, soak up a highly energetic Raiders outfit, and then flip it back on them. And that's what they did. And we've now got multiple examples of the Warriors staying in the contest for longer than their opponents. I haven't seen the Warriors crumble in any game this season. So in every game, they are competitive. However, the Warriors have lost a few games despite that. And yet the last 2 games, specifically the win over the Raiders, they absorbed it, they got through it, then they tore their opponent apart. And that is pretty fresh for Warriors folks, for the Warriors themselves, and it's bloody fun to watch, because when you think about the Warriors defending their try line and you're thinking, just survive, just defend it, just get through it, that's never happened in the past. Because if they concede 1 try, they're probably going to concede 2 tries. There's no chance of flipping that energy on their opponent. Against the Raiders, they limited the damage. They got through it. They got into their process, into their attacking structures. and smoked the Raiders in a celebration game. So I liked it. Grit and grind Warriors. How's your numero tahi Kiwi sports thing from the weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to go, since the Flying Kiwi stuff was always dominant in my mind at the start of a week, because that's when I'm going through and preparing the column and writing all that stuff and doing the research and watching the highlights and whatever. I'm going to go with one of them, and the leading banger in the parlance of our podcast from this weekend was Daisy Cleverley. And Daisy Cleverley is up there because her HB Køge team, they won the Kvinderliga in Denmark, so the top women's division in Denmark. They were going into the last round of the season. Køge were playing Brøndby, and they needed to either win that game, or they could draw that game, or they could lose that game by less than 10 goals, and they would be all right. In fact, I think even if they lost by 10 goals, they would have still won the championship on goal difference. They had to lose by 11 goals in order for that to be turned around. They drew 1-1 as it happened. Cleverley played the first half, which is a bit of a common thing. I think 5 of their 13 appearances this season have been either being subbed off or subbed on, more often on, at halftime. They've sort of rotated their midfield throughout. And yeah, she's not been one of the key players for Køge, but in her first season as a professional, she's been fairly regular, which was an injury or two which slowed her down, but she's been a common sight in these games for the best team in Denmark. They will have a chance to qualify for the Champions League next season as well, as supposing she's still there, supposing she stays. This also completes a Kiwi double in Denmark, because a couple of weeks ago, Marco Stamenic with FC Copenhagen, they won the men's Superliga. So they won the top flight in Denmark for both the men's and the women. Had a Kiwi midfielder involved in the championship team, Marco Stamenic, doing that one. And there might actually be a third title too, because the second division, which so it goes Superliga, first division, second division. So second division is third tier men's competition. Dalton Wilkins' Colding team, they are 1 point clear at the top with 1 round to go. So they've already been promoted to the second tier, which is a weird little conglomeration there, because Wilkins used to be teammates with Eli Just and Callum McCowart at SC Helsingør. They all went over, Just and Wilkins went over together, and then McCowart joined them a year later after playing a year with the Phoenix. So they were all teammates together at Helsingør. Just left to go to the division above for a different team. Wilkins dropped down, coming back off injury, looking for more regular game time. He dropped down a division. McCowart stayed where he is. Well, Eli Just's team's been relegated. Dalton Wilkins' team's been promoted, and Callum McCowart's team stayed exactly where they are. So transfers might still happen and change this, but as it stands, they're all three going to be reuniting in the second tier in Denmark. But none of them as teammates anymore. 2 of them at different clubs, which also got me thinking. Daisy Cleverley, Marco Stamenic, both league champions. It doesn't happen that often for the Flying Kiwis, men or women. You had a few like sort of Abby Urseg type dynasties, but it's not that common. Generally, the Kiwi players get in at the mid-table teams. We're more likely to see relegation battles than title challenges, but there were a few scattered around this year. There, Ben Waine at League One, he didn't play a lot for Plymouth Argyle after joining mid-season, but he did score 1 very crucial goal in their title challenge. They won the third tier of English men's football, so they've been promoted to the second tier. And Marco Rojas this was late last year, but he did win a title with Colo Colo in Chile, which was pretty cool. Scored the goal that actually clinched it for them. One of his high moments in an otherwise sort of in and out kind of stint there. It sounds like he's probably played his last game for that club, but he will have to go back to Chile after the international break to sort out the paperwork, which is a bit of a pesty one, but so it goes. And then of course the women's division in Scotland, the Scottish Women's Premier League, was a belter because you had 3 teams competing for the title there. Glasgow City with Michaela Moore, Rangers with Vic Hesson, Celtic with Liv Chance. In the end, Michaela Moore got that league title. However, everyone was a winner because Vic Hesson's team won the League Cup and Liv Chance's team won the Scottish Cup. So they all got a trophy. And then might as well just chuck in a bit of James McGarry and Storm Rue as well, starting in the A-League. I don't really count the A-League as part of the Flying Kiwis realms because it's a bit of a it's the intermediary professional league. But, give them credit where credit's due here because they're both champions as well.
Following up from the Warriors' grit and grind win over the Raiders, just want to highlight Ali Leiataua on debut for the Warriors. He actually ended up lining directly opposite Jared Croker, so he did play center. He did play right center against Jared Croker. I was pretty impressed, not because Ali Leiataua did anything outlandish. The thing about Ali Leiataua and Dimitri Sifikula specifically, but also Taintua Piki, they look comfortable in the NRL. Like, they make their debuts and they just look like NRL players. They don't take anything away from the team. They don't mean, like, it's not like, oh, we need to hold back here because we've got a debutant. No, the debutant is ready to play footy right now. And Ali Leiataua looked like that. He showed a few times that he could get, like, he makes contact up high, but then he gets down to his stomach. Quick play the ball, that's all you want. If you can't poke your head through, you want to make a contact, and then you want to get your belly to the ground as soon as possible. Ideally, you're on your hands and knees so you can get up and get a quick play the ball. He did that a few times. There was one time where there was a loose ball, and he kind of halfway got through a hole. That reminded me of his highlight from the week prior, where he picked up a loose pass and just burst through a hole. And I was like, ooh, but he didn't quite get through the hole against the Raiders. And also, when there was that the kerfuffle between Corey Horsburgh and Dylan Watene-Zelezniak, Leiataua was in there. He was in there with a stiff arm, with a cheeky little shoulder grab. And this is the thing, like, what did Sifikula do? It might have been his second NRL game. He basically punched Nathan Cleary. And Leiataua, he loves it as well. So there's that element. Yeah, like, you don't want to go around punching people on a footy field or in regular life. Like, bit of peace and love, folks. Like, we're all here together. You don't want to be doing any violent stuff. But the thing that I noted for both of them is they are very physical. They are very aggressive, and if you're not coming with that energy on the NRL field, you're going to get identified as a weak link. Sifikula and Leiataua in debut games, in Sifikula's second game, Sifikula's debut, he was landing shoulders on some of those Roosters forwards, and that stood out. Leiataua just looked comfortable in the NRL. I've been impressed by both of them. Both are from South Auckland. Leiataua said he's from Otara, but he's a Papatoetoe Rugby League junior who then went to King's College. He played midfield for King's College, but he also played fullback for SG Ball and Auckland Under-20s, which is right around the corner from De La Salle College, where Dimitri Sifikula went. He's an Otahuhu junior. He also played midfield for De La Salle College, and then both of them went to Redcliffe last year, and they made the final of Redcliffe of under-21s footy in Queensland with Redcliffe. Those are the foundations for two really solid NRL debuts from a couple of South Auckland youngsters. Keep it moving.
Yeah, moving on to where there is a new leader in the Aotearoa National Basketball League. That new leader is the Auckland Tuatara. They have won 6 on the bounce. They have a 9-3 record, putting them into first place. They have not lost for more than a month. The last team to beat them was the Otago Nuggets, who are now on a 4-game losing streak. So that tells you how long ago that was. And you know, it's an impressive side. They do have one American fella on the bench now. But he only played 15 minutes in their most recent game. He's not in the starting lineup. So their starting lineup is 3 Kiwis and a couple of Aussies. One of them is Jared Weeks, recently retired actually from the Australian NBL. He's going to go on and do some assistant coaching stuff. Rob Lowe also recently retired as well, so maybe he's running in the Cam Glidden's still under contract for next season at least. Jared Weeks and Rob Lowe are both averaging over 20 points per game. I think Lowe around about 20 points something, and Weeks is about 22. Weeks is also, so they're both, I think if you start to count, like put a cutoff in terms of playing a certain amount of games, that those would both be top 5 scoring players. Weeks is 5th in assists. Rob Lowe, if you discount Terrell Harrison, who hasn't played since the start of the season, then Rob Lowe was 1st in total rebounds per game as well. same deal with the blocks. Discount Harrison and Lowe as first. He's top 5 in steals as well. MVP areas from Rob Lowe. He's just doing bloody everything for that team. Stacking those box scores. He had another big game on the weekend. Weeks and Glidden both making more than 3 triples, like not just attempting, making more than 3 triples per game on average, shooting at better than 40%. I think actually better than 41%, but both of them above that mark. Charlie Dalton is super fun to watch. I think he's 19-year-old Aucklander who was part of that. Him and also Tom Beattie, part of that Harbour team, which won the National Under-19s competition like last week or the week before or whatever. Charlie Dalton's starting games and doing fun things, like a young dude making genuine contributions to the team. With the Otago Nuggets slumping, the Auckland Tuatara now have the best defense in the league. They're conceding 84.2 points per game against them. That's why they're the new front runners. And when you're doing good stuff like that, good stuff happens. I mentioned a couple of retirements from the Australian NBL. It's also Coach Aaron Young scooped up to be an assistant for the Perth Wildcats next year, which is amazing because Aaron Young, he was born in Texas, but he moved here when he was like, I don't know, 12 or 13 or something. He went to, I think he went to Rangitoto College. So he did like high school here. All his coaching stuff has been in the Kiwi scene. Happy to consider him as part of the Kiwi basketball and whānau. So another Kiwi fella, therefore, joining that Perth Wildcats team. You've got an assistant coach there to go with both the Webster brothers, Hiram Harris, and then development players, Dante Russo-Nance and Jack Andrew. 5 Kiwis in the playing roster for Perth Wildcats. Now they got a fella on the coaching staff as well. That's kind of incredible. Like, that actually is probably matching what the Breakers have done to this point, which is nuts. But there you go. Looking forward to those Breakers versus Perth games next year, where hopefully we can find a point in which there are 10 New Zealanders all on the court at once, which might be dreaming, considering we're counting DPs there, but it's the reason why we can't dream.
I'm dreaming of the Kiwi County Cricket Tour, where we have a bunch of Kiwi cricketing lads playing county championship cricket in England, most notably Henry Shipley, who has made his debut for Sussex. He scored 41 runs. He's also taken 3 wickets. That game is ongoing. We also have Ajaz Patel playing for Durham. Will Williams and Daryl Mitchell are playing for Lancashire. Will Williams, he took 3 wickets at an RPO of 9.3, and he might be the best Kiwi cricketer that no one knows about. Daryl Mitchell, he scored 68 runs in Lancashire's first innings. He's also averaging 55 with a strike rate of 172 in the T20 Blast. So Daryl Mitchell's good at cricket. Matt Henry's playing for Somerset. He hasn't done too much in this game right now, but he is having a good T20 Blast campaign, 11 wickets and an average of 15. Shout out Matt Quinn. He's always playing for Kent. And we do have Tom Latham playing against Matt Quinn. Tom Latham, Black Caps batter. He is playing for Surrey. So those games are happening right now, and hope they might be finished by the time we do our Nichecast podcast on Thursday, where I'll do a big wrap of all that stuff as well. Football Ferns for you?
Yeah, beauty. Football Ferns, they have trimmed their squad a little bit ahead of the World Cup. They've been working in camp. Not all the players have been in camp because some of them still got to finish off their club seasons. A couple of them won't actually finish off their club seasons till after the final World Cup squad has been named. But they started with 42 players, including everyone that seemed to be in sort of wider contention. Began training about 6 weeks ago, and immediately that 42 player list was cut down to 41 when Katie Rood was injured, did her ACL, and therefore out of contention for the World Cup. That did also include Chloe Knott and Lily Oldfeld as well. Chloe Knott was never she's not eligible yet, sort of just training to make up some numbers, but she did. She trained for the first 6 weeks and then left and signed with Auckland United for a little bridge, few bridge games leading into the next A-League season in between contracts there, so that's cool. Then Lily Oldfeld as well was like, she missed the whole A-League season with the Phoenix, was sort of like bring her into camp, see where she's at with the recovery, but wasn't actually ever fit enough to properly partake. So she's been trimmed from the squad. as well, which leaves another 6 players as well on top of that who have also been cut because they're down to 33 players. They started with 42, they're down to 33 players. The final squad, the actual World Cup squad, will be 23 players. So the other 6 players who have been cut since then, Devin Jackson, who's the only, I was going to say the only amateur player, but that's not true because there's a few college players in America, but the only domestic player beneath pro scene who was involved in these things. Devin Jackson's been cut, as well as 3 USA college players, Aniela Jensen, Maggie Jenkins, and Murphy Sheaf. Alyssa Wynnum is another one, and Hannah Blake as well. A couple of A-League players, but sort of fringe A-League players who haven't really, Blake has played for the football Ferns, but only a little bit. Wynnum has been in a squad, but hasn't actually played, hasn't been capped yet. This was all relatively simple. Like these are young and inexperienced players for the most part, or injured players that have been, or in one case, an ineligible player who have been trimmed from that 42 player group. The next 10 is where it gets difficult. Like those were simple moves. The next ones is where you have to start being like, well, we're cutting players who might have actually had a genuine expectation that they might have made, or if not expectation, then certainly a target to make that squad. Gets a bit frisky at that point, and you do have to start thinking not necessarily about the best 23 players, but also about the balance of the squad. And maybe you drop someone who's not quite as good as someone else because you want that other person because you need depth in that particular position or whatever, or you just want an extra attacker on the bench because you're more likely to use them as subs than you are as defenders, etc., etc. Obviously, as well, we're at the point now, it's about 6 weeks or so to go to the World Cup. We're at the point where it's no longer just the long-term injuries that are going to be crucial. Like if you have a relatively small muscle injury, that might now be something you can't recover from in time. There are a couple of those as well, like obviously Annalie Longo coming back from an ACL as a long-termer. She's still in the group, so that's a good sign that she might be able to progress far enough to give it a good crack. And then like Liv Chance, Betsy Hassett, Rhea Percival have all had injuries, should all recover by the time the World Cup starts, though, barring any setbacks. So that's all good. We shall see. But it's all getting pretty real now as far as that football Ferns squad goes. A few of these other countries around the world have already named their 23s. So we're getting close. We're getting very, very close.
Just a couple Kiwi NRL quick hitters here. Joseph, Manu, and the Roosters kind of suck. Joey Manu, and this is like the Roosters, I think they are last for tries scored. They're not scoring many points. Joey Manu has scored at least 20 points in his last 6 seasons. Right now, he's got 4 points. That is because Joseph Manu from Tokoroa has 1 try. In the 2 seasons prior, he's had at least 10 tries. Now he's got 1 try. He's also got 1 try assist and 1 line break. Last year, Joseph Manu had more than 10 try assists and more than 10 line breaks. So Joey Manu's got 1 try, 1 try assist, and 1 line break, all of which are well below his regular mahi. We also had Nelson Asofa-Solomona playing edge forward for the Melbourne Storm. Leiataua, he got injured, and then Asofa-Solomona came off the bench and played right edge, where he was absolutely disgusting. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because we did have the Nelson Asofa-Solomona edge forward mixtape from last season where he was disgustingly destructive in a couple of games at edge forward. Against the Sharks, he had 12 tackle busts and 2 line breaks. A couple of weeks prior, he had 10 tackle busts against the Dolphins. Like, Nelson Asofa-Solomona is the man, and he is really good at rugby league. Last night, Monday night, we also had the Eels versus Bulldogs game. This was interesting because Daejarn replaced Dylan Brown. Maybe Daejarn is a better number 6 right now than Dylan Brown and Kellen Ponga and Matt Burton, because I've seen it twice now. Daejarn coming up against Matt Burton. Last year, it was at Mount Smart, and Daejarn was playing for the Warriors. This year, He's playing for the Eels against the Bulldogs, and in both games, he might have been better than Matt Burton. So watch out for Daejarn. Makisi Makatoa was exceptional for the Eels as well. Good to see him getting game time from New Plymouth. And Hayze Perham. He's always one of the best players for the Bulldogs. Never gets talked about like that because they have Burton. They've got Reid, Mahoney, Marnie, whatever you want to call him. But Hayze Perham's always there as one of the best players for the Bulldogs. Pikiao Jr. from Rotorua, loving his mahi this season as well. What do you got?
I got a return of Breakneck's corner because the Breakers and the Phoenix have both signed an Aussie veteran in the last week, and they're just going to break those down a little bit because it's pretty interesting. Breakers first, they've signed Mangok Matiang. He is coming in effectively as a Rob Lowe replacement. Have seen it mentioned as a Derek Pardon replacement as well. Come around to that. 30-year-old, 6'10", South Sudanese Australian who's played for Australia internationally. Played 4 games of NBA basketball for the Charlotte Hornets a couple years back as an undrafted free agent. About 20 minutes in total. It wasn't much, but he did make the association. Mostly played as an overseas pro, but he did have half a season in Illawarra last year, interestingly, before moving to Israel. So that pretty much ticks the 2 major scouting hotspots for the Breakers, NBL and Israel. So there you go. He doesn't have any shooting range like Rob Lowe does, but he finishes nicely at the rim, and he's a very good rebounder who is a strong defensive player, which Modi Mayor has talked him up as a potential DPOY candidate, Defensive Player of the Year, which is interesting because Derek Pardon should have won the DPOY last year. He was their starting center. This kind of sounds like Pardon won't be back if there's like pivoting in that way. We'll be curious to see how that goes because the Breakers, of course, have yet to re-sign a single import for a second season since the ownership change. But there was interest expressed in getting all 3 of the last year's group returning, but nothing has happened yet, so we'll see how that goes. Should also mention that Lithuanian prospect Mantas Rupstavicius has reportedly signed as the next Breakers' next star. He's not French, but he is still a Euro, so keeping up that trend. Was eligible for the draft this year, but he's pushed that back in order to play a year of NBL to boost his stocks. Thinks he'll get drafted a bit later, a little bit older than the last couple next stars as well. He's already had his 20th birthday, which is interesting. Then there's the Wellington Phoenix signing goalkeeper Jack Duncan, formerly of the Newcastle Jets, also 30 years old, played 104 A-League men's appearances. He has experience in contrast to prospect Alex Paulson, who's pretty inexperienced. Duncan did have one last year in the Newcastle Jets contract, but they've released him early to join the Phoenix. He had a good season last year. In the email, I compared his stats to Ollie Sale, and they're sort of interesting over the last 3 years, bit of opposite trajectories there, where Sale slipped off from year to year, and Duncan seems to hold nice and steady. But the key point to note here is that while it might feel like an underwhelming signing, I think that's actually a good thing. I think that's a promising thing, particularly for Alex Paulson, because Duncan is here to challenge Paulson for the number 1 spot. He's not a starter. He's not a backup. He's like the cardboard cutout figure at Disneyland holding their hand up, being like, you must be this tall to ride the roller coaster, right? Like he's the standard bearer. If Alex Paulson is good enough, he will win that battle and he will be the A-League starter next year after preseason. If he's not good enough yet, then well, he now knows where the standard is because they've got someone who's sort of like the median level A-League goalkeeper. Like he's not the worst, he's not the best, he's right in the middle. The nice bang average, that's where Paulson needs to get above to be a starter. He now knows where that is. And in its own way, signing a median level goalkeeper is kind of an investment in Paulson for that reason, which at least that's how I see it. So, yeah, there we go.
The Black Six are about to, later this week, the weekend, in fact, they will start their European leg of their Pro League campaign. Both Black Six teams will be playing in Europe this weekend and for the next few weeks. Both Black Six teams are dead last in the Pro League. The men, 0 wins, 1 draw, 7 losses. They are 9 points behind 8th. So they're well and truly the worst team in the Pro League. Black Six women, 1 win, shout out, 2 draws, 5 losses. They are only 2 points behind 8th. Neither team's very good. Interesting to see what happens. We'll talk about it on the Niche Cast. Your last Kiwi Sports note.
Last one is that the Tall Ferns won a game on their European tour, which was awesome. They beat Poland 73-62 in their 4th game after 3 straight losses to Serbia and before they lost to Turkey, I think it was. This was the only game that they played in those five that wasn't against a team ranked like 20 places or so ahead of them. Tara Reid, 24 points and 10 rebounds. Charlie Sledger-Walker, 22 points. They were the standouts in that performance. Poland are actually about 10 spots lower than the Kiwis, who are ranked 29th. But, you know, I had a detailed last week. This is a Tall Ferns squad that's pretty young, pretty inexperienced, got some key players out injured, and they were away from home. That ain't easy. Like, that ain't easy. And, impressive victory considering that, even if the other four games on tour were all defeats. Now they move pretty much straight into the Asia Cup, which starts in 2 weeks, where a top four finish would also book them into the next phase of Olympic qualifying. So plenty of incentive there. The Tall Ferns have played at 3 Olympic Games in the past, but the most recent is way back in 2008 when Susie Bates was playing for the Tall Ferns back then, interestingly enough.
Whacking sixes, and I don't know if enough about Susie Bates's basketball game to say she's hitting threes.
I think from memory she was like a
power forward.
I think like a ducking and weaving kind of guard. I'm pretty sure. So maybe she was like hoiking up 3-pointers, and now she's hoiking up sixes, which is twice as much. So there you go. She's doubled her threes.
There are a couple of interesting cricket basketball combinations. Like if you can throw down massive dunks and bowl fast, that's pretty cool. If you can bang sixes and drain threes, like that's a good combination as well. Just a bit of cross sports.
Logan Van Beek had a basketball background as well, didn't he?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like if you're banging sixes, you also want to be draining threes. You know, you don't want to be banging sixes.
That's a distance game.
Yeah, you don't want to be banging sixes and then be Steven Adams. Steven Adams, what's the cricket version of Steven Adams?
Yeah, headbang sixes. Yeah. I don't know, a tidy opener or something. I'm not sure.
Of Steven Adams. You're saying Tom Latham is Steven Adams?
Well,
no, I got it wrong. It's Steven Adams is banging sixes. Like
yeah, I think we're the other way around there.
Yeah. Musical jam. Shout out to Estier. She's a Kiwi artist. She's got a new song, Mount. That is a soulful jam. Sestere. Beautiful Aotearoa jam. We've also got Aotearoa's Balu Brigada. They've got a new song, Find a Way. What's your musical jam selection?
New Jason Isbell album is worth a listen. There's a weird little project from the old man Bob Dylan as well, re-recording some of his previous songs. I think it was for like a live stream, and now randomly they put it out as a thing. But it's quite interesting. I think the arrangements, his voice isn't what it once was, but so it goes. And then also the lovely Aotearoa jams from Tom Lark and Jasmine Mary both got new projects out as of last week, I believe, and both awesome. So there you go.
That is the variety show. Big up yourself. I will work on our cricket basketball crossover, because I was thinking it was more like what's just a cool combination, as opposed to any players. If you're just a Matt Henry seam bowler, then you're the cutter and the dasher and the
3-and-D wing.
Yeah, there we go. We're building. We'll keep working on it for the niche cast. Big up yourself. Love Aotearoa. Just be happy to be here, because holy shit, it's sunny. Everything's all good. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Chir chir.